On April the 3rd, 2019, Professor Rose and myself were traveling to Botswana via Joburg, Johannesburg and Sun City. After having picked up our luggage, we took a taxi all the way to Sun City. The distance to get there is about 210 kilometers, and it took us about 3 hours driving time. Sun City is an artificial resort with a number of hotels in different price ranges. And the most expensive one is the Palace of the Lost City. We stayed in a hotel which was much cheaper than the Palace of the Lost City, but it was very comfortable with a big garden and a swimming pool and wonderful views out of our windows. Like in all the hotels of these resorts, you can find slot machines or one-armed bandits in the hall, but we didn't use it, of course. Outside the hotel there's a wonderful park, artificial as well, with a lot of monkeys climbing on the artificial rocks and sculptures. Early afternoon, we meet with Sabine Ostmann, a friend of mine, and took her car all the way to Gaborone in Botswana. Gaborone is the capital of Botswana. In the 60s, it had only about 12,000 inhabitants, and nowadays it's more than 230,000. On invitation of the Civil Aviation Authority of the state of Botswana, Professor Rose and myself gave presentations on aviation medicine for the doctors of this country. In the evening, we had a wonderful dinner about 30 miles west of the city of Gaborone in a restaurant which is called Mokolodi Lodge. Next morning, Sabine Ostmann and myself took her car and went to the Madikwe Game Reserve. Right after entering the reserve, we saw the first zebras and the gazelles. And here is the first elephant close to the road. On the way, many more zebras and springboks and a giraffe. Early evening, we arrive at the Madikwe Safari Lodge. For the night, we stay in a little house outside the main building, about 100 meters away. Next morning, during breakfast, we have uninvited additional guests on our table. Just a few pictures of this beautiful resort. Very comfortable, but unfortunately not inexpensive. Burning coffee powder against possible insects. Look at the great birds on top of the trees. Early next morning at around 7 a.m. we start our tour throughout the wilderness park, and the first thing we saw were gnus. Later on we saw a number of gazelles. And once again an elephant behind the bushes. Interesting to observe two pillmaker bugs or scarabs at work with a feces ball. It's still very cold early in the morning, but we do enjoy our breakfast right in the middle of the wilderness park. And during the ride we do need some woolen blankets to cover us from the cold. On the ground an unidentifiable cactus and a bush with a lot of thorns. Also a lot of elephant feces on the ground. Next to an old tree, an abandoned termite mound. Our excursion continues through a muddy dirt road. Next to us a number of giraffes. Observe the birds on top of the head. Apparently, he is enjoying breakfast as well. Next to us, a different kind of birds and a gazelle. and once again anew. In the distance, in the midst of the bushes, a fennec. A number of partridges close by. One of my favorite animals are the funny warthogs. A number of zebras looking astonished and anxious. 2 cheetahs coming very close to our observation car. Beautiful animals, but I must confess that I got a little anxious as well as they came really close to our car. Next to our car, they lay down and seem very relaxed. Until they finally observe a number of zebras not far away. Unbelievable how their hunting instinct awakens as their possible prey comes closer and closer. The zebras are approaching, and one can really feel the tension, and these animals are really unaware of the danger. When a larger number of zebras are approaching, they suddenly jump out of their hideout. At that point, I was so excited that I unintentionally shut off the camera. A most beautiful sunset, and we had wonderful nightcaps. On the way back to the lodge, the driver had bright searchlights to look at possible animals hidden in the green. Success, success. We really saw a gnu and later on a number of gazelles. After a most wonderful dinner and a good night's sleep, next morning we saw another group of warthogs. After leaving the game resort, we drove up to Gaborone, and after one night in a hotel, we drove again up to Serowe. In Serowe, we passed by the most modern hospital of the former president of the state, and then entered our hotel. Next morning, we drove again to Kama Rhino Sanctuary. So, we stepped up in a observation car and were on our way to see the rhinos, passing by a number of gazelles. And once again a gnu. And then in the distance, the first rhino close to a little lake trotting along the water. In our observation car, we came very close to a number of rhinos. After a long time of observation, they trotted away. On the right-hand side, a large group of marabous, dressed up in their smokings. On the way back to the park entrance, once again zebras and giraffes in the distance. Close to the exit of the park, we pass by a carcass of a gazelle brought up in a tree by a cheetah. Next leg is from the Kama Rhino Sanctuary to Francistown. We stayed the night there in a most wonderful hotel with a big garden, and the rooms were in little houses separated to each other with all the comfort you can imagine. Next morning we continued our drive to Planet Baobab, an area where a number of baobabs can be seen. Most impressive, these gigantic trees with a circumference of their stems that is amazing. We finally arrived at our destination, the Planet Baobab Lodge. We parked our car in front of one of these huge baobabs. We checked in and were shown our little hut for the night. The whole area is very nice indeed, with a swimming pool, however very cold. A very nice guest lounge with a bar on one side. At night, the illuminated baobabs in the distance. After a wonderful dinner at night, we took off the next morning for a tour to watch the meerkats. It's quite a long drive to get at the point where we could see the meerkats. The drive throughout the savannah, the very dry area, but it is absolutely worth it to see them digging for worms and bugs under the surface. Apparently they are not shy at all, so you come very close with your camera. Really most fascinating animals. After a late afternoon snack, we are heading back, passing by a waterhole with a lot of cattle. Next morning, we are heading to a large lake area, passing by ostriches and gnus. And finally ended up at the shoreline of this 100 kilometers wide flat lake. Millions of birds are at the shoreline to be seen. Leaving the lake area, we are passing by an unknown tree with banana-shaped fruit. And we end up in a small settlement of locals where they are producing wicker baskets. Of course, we had to buy one and bring it back to Germany. Back in our lodge after 3 hours of driving, we are hiking throughout an area of baobabs. A local guide is explaining the details of this amazing tree. We are once again impressed by the gigantic dimensions of this tree. Later on, we are passing by a termite hill with a height of more than 3 meters. We are fascinated by the colors of the setting sun illuminating the trees around us. Of course, my attempt to knock down one of the trees failed dramatically. We all enjoy a wonderful sunset. Next morning, we continue our drive to Maun. At the airport, we board a chartered small airplane to fly us along the Okavango Delta to a lodge about half an hour flying time away. Takeoff at the main runway in Maun. Looking down, we see a lot of small airplanes. This airport is supposed to be, as far as takeoffs and landings are concerned, one of the busiest in Africa. We overfly the little village of Man until we finally reach the Okavango Delta. The Okavango Delta is formed by the river of Okavango and has a width of about 20,000 square kilometers. It's one of the most humid and animal-rich areas of Africa. We soon approach our sandy landing strip close to our lodge, the Delta Lodge. Our pilot is an expert. It was a very soft landing. We are unloading our aircraft. Amazing how much cargo this Australian-made machine can carry. On the way to our wooden hut, an elephant. And here is a view to our fantastically styled palace with full of art and marble. As you can see, the air conditioning is working very well. And on the side you see the excellent technical equipment to highest standards. Walking distance to the lodge itself is about 10 minutes, and you see the luxury of this lodge with the busy manager. This lodge holds a very nice living room, and we were served an excellent dinner later on with local specialities. There were only 3 additional guests, people from Holland. On the way back to our hut in the evening, another elephant close by. After this wonderful experience in this lodge, we are heading back by airplane to Maun, overflying the Okavango Delta once again. This paradise is in acute danger, as Angola, the state north of Botswana, is building up dams in order to irrigate their agriculture. So they are stealing the water of the Okavango River, and the future of the whole area is questionable. So you better hurry up traveling to this unique area. We are on final to the main runway of Maun Airport. After about 2 hours of waiting time, I hop on a BAC 146 of a South African Airlines that brings me directly to Joburg. Beautiful to see the twin engines on the right-hand side above the clouds. Approaching Joburg, we fly directly overhead the city center before we land on the Joburg International Airport. A Boeing 747 of the German Lufthansa brings me directly to Frankfurt after a flying time of about 10.5 hours. After a most wonderful experience and voyage, I'm back home.